Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone. This is Mariam Kewan. When we hear the words terrorism or extremism, what comes to our mind is headlines, politics, and violence. But sometimes we tend to forget that behind every headline there is a human being, a person with a story, maybe a wound, pain, maybe some dreams or hopes that were twisted or shattered. Today we're not just going to talk about problems, we're going to talk about human beings, people, and the way to go forward, because I still cannot wrap my head around the fact that how can anyone, especially a youngster from anywhere in the world, come to believe that violence is the only answer? And then what can we as a global community do to help them offer a different path? To unpack this and a lot of other aspects related to this, I am thrilled to be joined by two world-class experts. We have with us Dr. Clark McCauley, who's a psychologist and an author who has literally spent decades in trying to study how the very mechanics of radicalization happens. Welcome. Along with him, we have Anna Shaan, who works on the ground. She works with different governments, she works with different organizations and communities to build resilience against these forces. Welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Clark, let's start with you. In your book, Friction, you've talked about how radicalization happens to them and us. I got really intrigued by this fact, them and us factor. For the audience, from a very layman's perspective, what is the core? What is that basic human need that maybe does not get fulfilled, and that is what the extremist groups are exploiting now?
Well, we said radicalization happens to both them and us. It happens at the same time. That's what intergroup conflict means. And at the bottom of intergroup conflict is love. Not hate, love. And the love is for the people we care about, our people, our ethnic group, our national group, our ethnicity, maybe even our town. And when another group harms or threatens or victimizes our group, we feel anger, we feel shame if we're not doing anything about it, we feel humiliation for ourselves and for our group. And these emotions push us to respond. They push us toward, especially anger, pushes us toward revenge, or sometimes more gently described as justice.
So can we say that the societies that are more closely knitted, where people care about their people more, the collectivist societies, are they more vulnerable to such?
Yes, I think so. It requires caring in order to make the sacrifices, take the risks that come with engaging in violence against them to save us.
Interesting. Okay, Anna, coming to you, because you've been working in different regions, you work across Africa, the Balkan states, and the Middle East. Can you give us a glimpse of a person who you've met, or maybe a story that you've uncovered or heard about, where human wound was the actual reason why they did what they did? What was it that the person truly needed?
I think that human needs are quite complicated, and you're right. We've spoken to a number of people. We've developed programs in different countries. It's important to say extremism doesn't belong to any one group or any kind of particular country. It's something that we see in many different societies. And I think it comes down to there is a very human need to feel that you are taking action, particularly for a group you care about, as you describe. Taking Dr. Clark's point about the psychological dimension, what would this mean for us, I guess, as practitioners, is understanding everyone has in them human needs and human strengths, and they're different for all of us. So there is a lot of cases, I think, where we need to look at the person's goals and interests, their history and their biography, and understand what really matters to them. I think as Hadaya, we have been working for several years in partnership with the Mohammed VI Foundation in Morocco with women who've been involved with extremism in the past and are now pulling away. What those women need now is a chance to rebuild lives in their community. And so what they want is a chance to build a business, to provide food for their family, for their children, to see them as somebody who's important in the community. And all of those things that give them dignity, that give them purpose, are helping them to leave extremism behind them and step forward with confidence.
With confidence. Okay, so if we talk about this key driver that you said, the meaning, the purpose, or respect for that matter. Clark, coming to you, there's this theory which leads to the quest for significance. So they say the key driver to certain things is that sense of purpose, meaning, or respect. Is it the same? Is it actually this?
I don't think that's a very useful way of thinking about the problem. You could say everybody has this need for significance, in which case, how do we explain that only very few people turn to violence? If it's a problem, if it's a need that we've all got, it can't explain how only a very few turn to violence. But I do have an example, if you would permit me, of somebody for whom emotion carried the motion to violence. His name was and is Momin Khawaja. He came from a Pakistan origin family. He was brought up in Canada. He went to good schools. His father got a PhD in political science from the University of Syracuse. His father became an international education expert and traveled around the globe. And what pushed Momin Khawaja was first the Second Intifada, and second, the invasion of Afghanistan, and third, the invasion of Iraq. And in all of these, he saw Muslims suffering from Western interventions. And he argued with his father what to do about this. And his father was an academic, so his father argued in favor of trying to understand, trying to explain, trying to organize Muslims to peaceful resistance. And his son, with the impatience of youth, argued, no, these people are suffering now. We have to do something now. And in the end, that emotion, that feeling of caring for the suffering of people that he loved, really, in the end, that moved him to participate in a plot to set off a fertilizer bomb in England. And he was caught, and he's in jail now. But here's somebody, what was his job? He was taught, he learned computer science. He had $100,000, this is 20 years ago, $100,000 a year job as an IT expert for an agency of the Canadian government. And he quit that to do what he felt had to be done to fight for the people that he cared about. So notice the elements of this. This is not somebody who's stupid, not somebody who's uneducated, not somebody who is a loner. He lived with his family. He loved his parents. He loved his brothers and sisters. This is not somebody
a typical case that we often
he's not a social miscast. He's very well socially integrated. He's very smart. He's accomplished. But the feeling, the emotion, in response to the perception of suffering of Muslims around the world that he cared about, that is what pushed him.
So if I say that the statement that we often get to hear, they were brainwashed.
I think that's not very helpful. For one thing, it's not even very clear what brainwashed means in a psychology sense. People tend to use that word when they mean something they don't understand, reach down and with irresistible persuasion, changed somebody. Well, that's not how persuasion happens in the first place. But in any case, you can't say that he was brainwashed. No outside force reached in to Momen Khawaja's head. In fact, he was busy with arguments with his father about what to do. A very reasonable, very intelligent person.
Yes.
So
Okay.
nobody would say that he was brainwashed, I don't think. And there are more cases like Momen Khawaja. So
Fine.
I offer him as an example because I think he shows that, and I think you've used this phrase, that there are myths about the origins of terrorist violence.
And it is very important to debunk those myths as well, because a
Yes,
lot
it
of
is.
people, they just totally believe in them, and they also start preaching them. And that is how people get manipulated into believing that this is the resort or this is the way to go about it. And this is exactly what we are trying to do through this podcast as well, and the other work that we keep on doing, that no, that is not the solution, that is not the way to go about it. And sometimes you might not even know that there is an other party trying to manipulate you into something that you're not supposed to do. I would also like to ask Anna, before coming to you, there's one more thing that I'd like to know. So is radicalization a sudden flip, that all of a sudden you're just at that point where you think that violence is the way to go about it? Or is it a step-by-step process, or there are different layers involved into this process? Because it really intrigues me as well, and I would like you to clarify this for the audience as well. How does this happen? How does this work?
It works both ways.
Okay.
We have examples, case histories of people who moved very slowly. First, they were asked to do something small, like carry a message, maybe to provide some information about something going on in the city. Then slowly they were asked to do more important things, to carry a weapon from one side of the town to another.
Okay.
And then they progressed from that to asking to actually participate in a violent act, maybe to start by driving the getaway car, and then later escalate to actually pulling the trigger. So there are cases like that where it's a very slow, step-by-step desensitization to violence kind of a progress. But then we have other cases where it happens almost overnight. Your brother, he's a militant. He asks you to come and help in what he's doing. He's your brother, you love him, and you join him. Not because you're political, not because you've had any radical political ideas yourself, but because somebody you cared about asked you to come and help. And for some people, that's enough. All in one step, they join the group. They become a militant. Now, after they join, of course, they usually learn some justifications, some political reasons. They learn a story of victimization that justifies the violence. But the way they got there in the first place sometimes is just this immediate leap that does not depend on political ideas at all.
Interesting. So we're talking about sane people, because there's also this misconception which I'd like to break over here as well. There's this research, according to START, many individuals who become involved in terrorism do not have any pre-existing mental disorder. So it's often a process of social and ideological persuasion, I would say.
Yes, absolutely, you're right about that. The incidence of mental disorder amongst militants and members of a terrorist group is no greater and often less than the incidence of those same mental disorders in the general population. And you could see why that would be. If you're a member or a leader of a terrorist group and you're considering a new recruit, do you want somebody who's mentally unstable? Who has bad social skills? And these are descriptions of people with mental disorder. They're not as competent. You don't want somebody like that
True.
in your group, underground, trying to escape the police and security all the time. You can't afford somebody who's got a mental disorder. So if anything, mental disorder is less common amongst members of a militant group or a terrorist group than it is in the general population.
Perfect, perfect. So we've tried to understand, I say, the software of radicalization from Clark. Now I would like to come to Anna to learn a bit about the hardware, because she works on the front line with different communities, with different governments on different levels. So Anna, from your point of view, I'd like to know, how does a concrete grievance, like let's say unemployment, how can that be twisted into being a justification for violence?
It's definitely not a simple story, and I think one of the reasons so many myths about terrorism exist is because it's a complicated answer. Lots of people face unemployment, and lots of people don't become terrorists as a result. So you can't say that unemployment causes terrorism, but you can look at a more complex environment. In places, and there are many places around the world where there are large populations who have no realistic prospect of earning a good income, they feel a little bit hopeless. They think, I studied hard, I did what I was told, I can't get a good job. Maybe if I can't get a good job, I can't find myself a good husband or wife. How will my life turn out the way that I want it to? In the absence of these things, there's frustration, there can be resentment, and these can bubble up to make a person perhaps more interested in reacting with violence, or drawn to ideologies. Or in different dynamics, it might be much more pragmatic than that. A person says, I can't get a job, and a militant organization or a terrorist organization or an extremist group turns around and they say, we need a motorcycle driver, and we'll give you $200 if you drive for us. And all of a sudden, that person is in. And, there are lots of examples where this can escalate. I know from some of the work that was done by my organization, Hadaya, before, they were talking to a young man who was from Africa. But he had an example where he lost his job. He was the victim of a beating or an abuse. He was angry and he was unemployed. And then the terrorist group offered him a position, so he joined. He didn't have an ideological commitment to that organization, but he wanted the money and he wanted the status, and also he wanted to, get back at the people who had beaten him and stolen his bike.
So there was resentment.
He was resentment that motivated him in those circumstances. I think the good thing for us to know, though, is if a person is tempted to be involved with violence because of economic factors, then the solution is relatively simple. We try and find ways to create opportunities for that person that don't involve violence. And in some ways, that's got to be part of the solution. But I think we also need to recognize we live in a complicated world. And employment opportunities are hard to come by for lots of people. And so another thing that we also have to recognize is that we need to help people find a sense of who they are outside of just what they do.
Okay, fine. So if we say that all these factors, they cannot only be the deterministic factors for somebody who goes towards these things. Now, there's this study by UNDP 2017, but it said that a lack of trust in governance institutions also plays a significant factor in an individual's decision to join an extremist group rather than the religious ideology alone. I would like you to highlight a bit, because there used to be this misconception that normally it's just the religion that comes into play. But it's a lot more than that. The lack in the I would say the governmental institutions is also one of the reasons.
I think that's right. I think we need to build a complicated picture. Again, happy, well-adjusted people don't read a extreme interpretation of a religion or extreme interpretation of an ethnicity or an extreme interpretation of politics. A happy person doesn't read this and then think overnight, this is my belief system now. It's a more complicated scenario from my perspective. I think what we see is that trust in institutions can be a powerful protection barrier. There has been some studies in different parts of the world about what builds resilience to extremism, what makes populations less interested in engaging in violence. And one of them is trust in institutions and a belief that my voice matters when it comes to those institutions making decisions. It isn't the only factor that factors it in. There's more than 10 different factors which might shape resilience, but absolutely trust in institutions is a big one. And so I think we have to think about, what do we do when trust in institutions is low? And the answer is that we need to work systemically on understanding why that trust in institutions is low, and trying to correct it where we can. And we have to correct it through really detailed looking at the facts. I was speaking once with a police officer, not in Pakistan, in a different place, and they said, oh, well, trust in the police is very low. People think here that the police are brutal, so we need a good advertising campaign that tells people the police are not brutal. And our answer is, that campaign will fail if the police are brutal, because you can't tell someone something they know isn't true.
You cannot sell the counter-narrative.
Yeah, so instead, what you should look at is, if the trust in the police is low and people think that the police are brutal, what needs to change inside the police? And so I think that this is why sometimes when we talk about preventing terrorism and a prevention-based response, it's not just about what this person or that person needs to do, it's about how we need to change as a whole of society. And that involves governments, it involves civil society, it involves youngsters, it involves teachers. Everyone has a part to play.
Very right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now coming back to the fact that if you talk about Pakistan, Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable nations to climate change because of floods. There have been a lot of displacements. So people have actually lost their families, their homes, entire villages have been washed away. So if we only talk about the 2022 floods, there were more than 33 million displacements. Now the scenario in those areas, because there's no urgent response, no quick response. So can we hypothesize that such a situation creates a fertile ground for extremists? Because it is sort of the same instability that we've talked about. Now the job opportunities are gone, now the homes are gone, now the families are gone. What do? Their source of livelihoods are gone.
Yeah, look, I think you've raised a really interesting question, and how communities respond to disasters and emergencies is a really complicated one. Obviously, the scale of the 2022 floods in Pakistan was something that the entire world took notice of. It was a devastating situation. But Pakistan is not alone in facing kind of conflicts and crisis. It is something that people have to deal with. Again, thinking about why do people start to engage in violence, it's always a complex story, and that's why it's really important we have podcasts like yours to break down some of these ideas in ways that we can understand. I think one of the reasons that places that have been affected by conflict become more vulnerable is that it can sometimes override some of the systems that make our communities stronger. So, for example, as you describe, if due to floods people move away, they're away from their communities of support. Maybe they lost family members, people who used to help them build their ideas and listen to them and give them a voice and a support. So they have no family, they have no community. Maybe they've lost their job and so they're feeling vulnerable. Maybe the rate of rebuilding isn't happening the way that they want and they feel anger and frustration about that. All of these create a complex system of grievance, but also a system of lack of support that can create some vulnerability. So I think it's always a complicated answer. We can't say that flooding causes terrorism, or we can't say that earthquakes cause terrorism, but we can say that when communities face crisis, whether it's a natural disaster or a conflict, when communities face crisis, some of the things that make our communities stronger can be weakened. However, it is also worth saying that sometimes when communities face natural disaster and crisis, it's also a chance for us to remember how our communities can pull together. It's a really strong sense of support as well.
It's quite accurate, Anna. Now let's talk about identity, intolerance, us versus them a bit more, because I believe this is what the world is facing right now. We are running out of patience. We are becoming intolerant towards each other. The caste system, the sectarian divide, that is sort of becoming the main issue, as you've already highlighted in the beginning as well. So I would like to ask you how group identification works and how difficult does it become for you, especially for working in areas where this ethnic divide and sectarian divide is quite high.
Group identification means caring about what happens to a group. It's not the same as empathy, which means feeling what other people feel. It's not the same as sympathy, which means feeling bad for other people's problems. Identification means you feel what's happening to the group. You can feel what is happening to a group in both directions. When things go well for them, they're succeeding and advancing, you feel joy, pride. When things are going badly for the group and they're suffering, they're diminished, they're failing, you feel maybe shame if you haven't done your part to help. You feel anger. Maybe you feel fear that things are going to get even worse. So identification with a group is the occasion of feeling many different kinds of emotions, both positive and negative, depending on what's happening to the group.
Okay.
Now, this capacity of human beings to feel in this way, to care about people who are really strangers. I mean, an ethnic group, a national group, a religious group, you don't know these people.
Yeah.
You've never met them. You're never going to meet even a small fraction of them. So it's
But
really kind of...
You just assume things about them. Yeah.
Well, you care about what happens to them as opposed to assuming what happens to them.
Yeah.
But I just want to make the point that this is a quintessentially human capacity, this capacity to care about a large group that you identify with. That capacity to identify with some large group of strangers is really quite mysterious when you think about it. There's nothing like that in the animal world. You can go study chimpanzees and you do not find them caring about what happens to chimpanzees in next door to them. They only care about the ones that are part of their little group.
Okay.
So it's really a mysterious and powerful and quintessentially human capacity that we're talking about. And so when you think about it like that, you would say intergroup conflict is the price we pay for this marvelous capacity to care.
Okay. Anna, coming to you, because your work specifically revolves around helping governments build, especially you work in the countries with deep-seated ethnic divides or sectarian divides. So how do you get the rival groups to sit together maybe on one table for dialogue or negotiation? How difficult does that become for you?
I think it's a difficult thing. There are many organizations around the world, many individuals who are amazing at building kind of mediation. But I think one of the things that can be really powerful is finding out the things that we have in common. And often we have more in common than we think. And then building a case for sitting down together and going through and thinking about some of those things. I know I was speaking possibly earlier today with Dr. Clark, and one of the things he said is, even as a child, maybe somebody does something to you, your instinct is to punch them. And obviously, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your words, but your instinct might be to punch them. But you don't punch them because you know that if you punch them, they might punch you back.
True.
And so taking some of that lessons learned, it also works at a community level. Sometimes when as a community we feel grievance, we have to recognize the other community might feel grievance as well. There are always multiple perspectives on every story. And it is always the right time for dialogue to try and find some mutual understanding, to try and find some connections. Building some common understanding is a really important pillar of peace, and one that we need to reflect. I think the other thing that's really important to think about is whether you're doing it kind of at a political level of working with governments, but more often working with individuals, is helping us to build the skills to make meaning and construct our own identities, to belong to our group and care about our group without necessarily seeing the other groups as the enemy.
Dr. Clark, coming towards you, let's talk a bit about the way out. So we've focused a lot on why and how people get in. But what if somebody wants to get out? What if somebody wants to disengage at some layer? Maybe they get this realization that, oh, what I'm doing is wrong. Maybe I am on the wrong path. But then what are the barriers that the person has to face to, maybe disengage, push the eject button? Is it that easy? And then again, what could be the role of friends, families, or groups in trying to help them come towards the right path?
Well, there are studies of people who have disengaged from terrorism. One of the things that's been found out is that often they don't give up the ideas about right and wrong that they had before.
Okay.
They have other reasons for disengaging, personal reasons. Maybe they're just tired. It's an exhausting business, living underground, being in danger from the police and the security people all the time. This is an exhausting way to live.
Okay.
So some people just get tired. You could say they burn out. Some people lose confidence in the leadership of the militant group. They think that the activities and the choices that the group has made are not the right ones. They still think the group has a warrant for violence. They still think that they were right in their estimate of the harm that's happening to the people they care about and the moral right to use violence to right those wrongs, to take revenge. They still believe all of that.
Okay.
But they're not ready to continue in the violence themselves.
So maybe they're just too tired or
Too
fatigued.
tired, or they want other things. Like, supposing you getting on in years, you're beginning to think to yourself, well, gee, I'd like a normal life. I'd like to have a wife or a husband. I want to have children to come after me. And the life I'm living now, that's not going to happen.
True.
So I got to quit if I wanted that kind of a life.
So that
So
realization is good
So they
enough.
quit,
Yeah.
but they haven't changed their minds about the value of what they were doing.
Okay.
So there's many reasons. That lack confidence in the leadership. They are just tired. They want a different kind of life. So they quit the violence, but they don't quit the ideas that led them to violence.
So the ideology remains
Right.
the same. Okay.
Yeah,
then-
so
and
some people talk about de-radicalization, and that usually means giving up the ideas. And other people think, no, we should focus more on disengagement. That's giving up participation in violence.
So these are two
Without
separate things.
two separate things.
Okay.
And all along, the ideas and the actions are very different because there's 100 people with extreme ideas for everyone that ever does anything, let alone anything violent. So this disjunction between the ideas and the actions, it happens in the radicalization going in, and it happens in the de-radicalization of people coming out.
That's an interesting take, and I think you have clarified for the audience as well, because normally we think they go hand in hand. So once you're disengaging, that means maybe you've let go of that ideology. And
In some ways, from my experience, there are as many ways out of extremism as there are ways in, and people take different pathways. At Hadaya, we've done work with partners in the Middle East, Nigeria, Tunisia, Central Asia, as well as here in South Asia, and in complex places like Iraq. What we find is, as Dr. Clark described, people leave extremist or violent extremist organizations for all kinds of reasons. And sometimes it is because they reject the ideas that once drew them. Sometimes it is because they don't want to live that life anymore. I think what's really important and what that we promote is a needs and strengths-based approach to pulling someone out of extremism. You need to understand that person's individual motivations. What are their goals and interests now? What is their history and what have they done? And also, what skills and competencies do they have as a person to rebuild their life? But I think it's really important to recognize that one of the big barriers that people face when they leave extremism behind and want to rehabilitate and reintegrate in the community is the community themselves. A lot of people face a lot of stigma when they leave extremism behind and come back to the community. And sometimes that stigma is fair and sometimes it is unfair. What we find, though, of course, is if a person wants to go back to a community that has suffered at the hand of the groups that the person was a part of, then there needs to be some sort of community level dialogue and conversation. It's a case of how do we structure this? How do we make sure that the community feels safe and that they've had a voice as well? And that's a really important part. And one of the ways that we've been working on that is through really detailed work with both social workers and psychologists in places like Indonesia and Nigeria. But we've also been doing a lot of work with families and recognizing the family and the extended family or the community network plays an important role, because the person will not be able to resettle in our community unless we let them.
Can they actually have a normal life?
I think so. One of my mottos, I think, it depends on, again, this is extremely individual stuff. But I think one of the things that's useful for us to think about is the status quo sustainable? I think it's not. There needs to be pathways out if we are ever going to decrease risk over time. The second point that's really important is to know that help is available. There are resources to guide the social workers to work with these individuals. Ideas don't shift instantly, behaviours don't shift instantly. People often move one step forwards, one step backwards. Progress happens incrementally. Some people may not rehabilitate, but a great many do. And so I think the third point is we can't forget that rehabilitation is genuinely possible. And an example that I would give is there was a man I knew from Australia. He had at one stage been involved in a white supremacy group, and later in his life he was involved in multicultural affairs. He had completely rejected the ideas of his youth. And as Dr. Clark described, that doesn't happen for everyone. Some people still hold the ideas in their heads and just choose not to act on them. But I think we cannot forget rehabilitation is necessary, and with the right supports, it is possible.
Anna, keeping it very short, based on all that you've seen, what is that one thing that still gives you hope? Where is it that you're seeing the change?
I see change all the time. I think there is a lot of hope. There is a lot of opportunity. I have the privilege of working with amazing partners around the world, and I see communities who are pulling together to define a new kind of future that isn't defined by violence, and that involves building resilience, it involves facilitating rehabilitation, and it involves sharing a common understanding about the future and building sense and purpose together.
I think culture and community can make a big difference in whether rehabilitation is required, let alone what kind of rehabilitation. I think of stories of men who retired from active service, as they called it, in the Irish Republican Army, and researchers had no trouble finding them. Everybody knew which bars in Belfast to go to if you wanted to talk to some ex-IRA guys. And they went back into their lives as honored veterans, as if someone came back from army service for the state of Pakistan, and the neighbors respected them for what they had done for the country. So it is possible for people to quit the violence and return to a community that appreciates them, respects them, doesn't need as much help in rehabilitation as some of the other cases, such as Anna's been describing.
So it is different for different people, individuals, and then I can say that it is wrong to generalize based on one incident, because normally that is what people do. And even when it comes to extremism, based on one person's doing, people generalize that over to the entire religious group or the country, which is unfair. Fine, we've been doing some really serious discussion on critical issues, but after all, our experts are also human beings, and this is the exact thing that I said in the beginning as well. So I want to lighten the mood for a bit. There's going to be a quick rapid fire round. Whatever comes to your mind first, you just have to say that. Don't take a lot of time to think about it, okay? They were certainly not prepared for this. Okay, G. what is one book that has profoundly changed how you see the world? Not on extremism, please.
Bible.
Okay. And you, Anna?
I have read millions of books in my life, and all of a sudden I cannot think of the name of a single book. My brain has gone completely empty. I apologize.
So, a rapid fire round is giving you a tough time, yeah? So, if you could have a 1-hour dinner with any historical figure to discuss conflict resolution, who would that be? Anna, you first.
I would really love to speak to some of the people who were involved in lots of different conflicts. I work at multiple level. I'm not going to answer.
Mother Teresa,
Okay. And any specific reason behind that?
because she worked in conflict areas with very sad and beat down people and was able to make them feel the power of the Spirit that was available to them, poor, injured, sick as they were.
So humanity above. Okay. Dr. Clark, outside of your work, what is the biggest source of hope or optimism for you?
Children,
Children. Anna?
For me, it is time in nature and seeing the natural world. We live in an incredible planet.
Do you even get time for that?
good question.
Because I believe the sort of serious work that you're doing, it's extremely difficult to even comprehend, because you do get into that tunnel and then it sort of becomes difficult getting out of that.
But our centre is based in Abu Dhabi. We live by the ocean. Yesterday, I saw sea turtles.
Oh,
what an amazing
nice.
thing.
Oh, nice. So you do get your times in between.
do.
Yes. Okay. So if your job gave you a superpower just for one day, what would that be? You first, Anna.
If my job gave me a superpower, I would like the ability to understand thoughts that people were struggling to put into words. You know, those ideas you have that you can't make them come out your mouth.
Dr. Clark.
I'd like the wisdom of Solomon.
Okay. And the last one. If you were not doing this, what would be the dream job? Dr. Clark.
I've never done anything but be a teacher and an academic my whole life. Once upon a time, I thought of going to business school, so maybe that's what I would do.
Business school. Okay. Interesting. And you?
I think if I wasn't doing this, maybe I would have liked to have become a teacher.
Teacher. Okay, fine. So that is a commonality. No, I think there's no joy other than teaching, because I give lectures to master level students at a university. And honestly, everybody asks, how do you manage? And I say that is literally my me time. I can't even express in words how much I enjoy interacting with them. So it's like a two-way process. They're learning a bit from me. I'm learning a bit from them. I'm a business management postgraduate. So yeah, your dream job, yeah.
Lots in common.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for that round. Now I would like to come back to the discussion. Just a few more pointers before we conclude the episode. We have to talk about youngsters, the youth, because in the beginning I said that I still can't wrap my head around the fact that how can a youngster resort to violence and not dialogue, discourse. That is what bothers me. If you talk about Pakistan, more than 64% of the population is youth, aged between 18 to 30. So we say they are the potential engine for an economic growth. But then again, what if they feel disenfranchised? What if they do not feel involved? What if they feel that we do not have ample opportunities for us? And what if they fall prey to such extremist mindsets? So what is the way to go about it? Especially for youngsters, what is it that we need to do?
I think we need to try to develop a consensus, a norm that says that violence, especially political violence, is not useful in practice. It doesn't help the people that we care about. And that hurting people who have not hurt us because they're members of some other group, it's immoral. The Quran says it's immoral. Christian churches say it's immoral. So I think what we need is an emphasis on the two ways in which violence is neither useful nor moral. And if we could all agree on that, we could avoid those first steps toward violence that produce the escalations, the actions and the reactions that lead to ever more violence.
Then it's a chain, it would keep on happening. Right. So violence can never be the solution to any of these.
I wouldn't say never, but I'd say we should have a very strong norm against it. If it's a matter of real survival, real existential survival, I think it can be justified. There are things called just war theory that try to lay out the conditions under which using violence to protect your community, your people, is justifiable. But most people don't slow down to think about just war theory and its conditions. They just feel the anger, they feel the frustration, they feel the humiliation, and they just want to strike back. And that is the kind of tendency we got to develop norms against.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anna, coming towards you, towards the very end, we've talked about youngsters, we've talked about youth. Now let's talk about digital media and social media, because there are different surveys that suggest that youngsters have started relying on social media, their phones, the gadget that they have in their pockets, as the primary source for information, which also gives a lot of room for fake news and disinformation, sometimes even propaganda, online propaganda happening. How can we make sure that, they do not get towards that and they sort of understand, or how important is it that the counter narratives are also tech savvy and just as widespread as the propaganda tools are?
Great question. I think the first thing, reflecting on what you said, like here in Pakistan, 64% of the population are youngsters. That is an asset of hundreds of millions of people who can be part of solving our problems. And I think it's always really optimistic for us to remember that some young people are involved in violent extremism, but it's a tiny majority. Young people are an incredible source of power and strength and opportunity and ideas. So one of the things I think that's really important to me is let's get young people involved in making decisions about the kind of communities that we want to build. When it comes to social media, often the two come up hand in hand, right? Because the younger you are, the more you're on your phone. Everyone knows this. But I think we do need to figure out, how are we going to address social media and new and emerging technologies? Our organisation at Hidayah, based in the UAE, we did some research on, first of all, understanding what does AI mean for counter-extremism, for example. And what we found is, of course, terrorist organizations and extremist groups and militant groups, they are going to use AI. But at present, they're mostly using it for translation and to evade detections when they're posting on social media. One of the things our research found is people who work in terrorism prevention have been so fixated on thinking about how terrorists will use AI and social media and other technology that we forgot to ask ourselves, what can people like us do with these powerful tools in our hands? And so I think a really important part for us to think about is, what does wise and use of these tools look like? And I think one of the real risks, both of social media, you mentioned fake news or misinformation. One of the things that the speed of information has made possible is it's harder to trust what's true anymore. It's harder to know. So one of the things that's more important than ever is remembering to think critically. What am I reading? Is it true? Who would have said it? Might they have had another agenda, a hidden agenda when they put this message out?
So the source matters as well.
The source matters as well. Is there a reason why people are pushing this? Think twice before you repost. Think twice before you click. And also, it's very important that we put other narratives out there. We have these amazing tools in our hands. The vast majority of people on this earth do not support violence, and yet we never hear from them. They're the silent majority. And so one of the things that we can do is use social media to connect people. There was an imam our team have been working with in the Western Balkans, and as he said, he goes, the people who need me the most aren't in my mosque. And they said, okay, then you need to get online where those young people are and find a way to connect with them. And he has been, through some training we did on social media use, he's been trying to connect with young people in new ways. So I think for me, the important thing about technology is, of course, that we use it wisely, that we understand it has limitations, that we think critically about what we're reading, but mostly that we recognize that technology has the power to connect us in ways we've never been connected before.
Right, so that's just a whole new way of looking at one same thing. But sometimes we do not ponder critically, just as you mentioned, and without even realizing, we keep on engaging with such content and we keep on sharing that. And that is how the algorithm supports the fake news. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Thank you, Anna, for a truly enlightening conversation. You've reminded us that to counter extremism, we need to first understand human beings, because quite rightly, the sort of determinants that you talked about, the need of belonging, the love for family, caring, all these elements, these are what, I mean, it's a very complex work. The nature of your work is very complex, but thank you, Dr. Clark and Anna, for a truly enlightening conversation. It was definitely insightful. And you have reminded us that to counter extremism, we first need to understand the human. We need to understand the human heart and the social fabric of society and the important role that communities, family, and friends can play. Your work is complex, very difficult, but it's not without hope or solutions. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is it from this episode. Inshallah, we'll see you next week with another guest. Till then, take really good care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.